Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Sessions Cafe, brought to you by Entrigue magazine. I'm your host, Keri D. Singleton, and today we welcome back to the show my brother from another mother, Mr. Andino Ward. How are you, brother?
Very good, Keri. And as always, it's a pleasure to be here with you.
It's a pleasure to have you. You were a guest on our very first show, our very first episode, I should say, back in 2021, which we got an award for. That episode was called A Father's Love, a Conversation with Andino Ward, man. And thank you for sharing your story with us way back when. How are you doing today, though?
Well, first, let me just say that basically, that interview was probably the only interview that I will ever say was one that I truly enjoyed and appreciated.
Wow, brother.
So I want you to know that, which is obviously a great benefit to you. Above and beyond that,
thank you.
I'm good to go.
70 years young
70
now.
years old, basically, and still kicking.
Yeah, still kicking it with the actual factuals.
You got it.
Yeah, so welcome back to the show, brother. So the first episode, again, was a double episode that we did out in Philadelphia, where you're from. Pretty cold and chilly that day, I remember. And I actually had a cold, but we got through it, and I learned so much. It was
I think you had a little more than a cold. Because you were going through it, but you were a trooper.
I was trying, brother. But, learned a lot about you, had a really great, candid conversation. And I feel like our friendship was almost born of that interview. So it was a great experience for me, man.
Agree.
What's been going on since then, since 2021? What are some of the new things? I mean, I got my cards, but what are some of the things that you have going on since then?
New granddaughter.
Congratulations.
She's the 11th of 11 grandkids.
Congratulations.
She's the youngest, so her starting the podcast, or should I say continuing that. Also, doing a lot more in terms of short documentaries, and films. And I'm about to enter into the world of DJing, although I don't term myself a DJ.
You're going to be doing with the turntables, or you're going to be cheating?
Yeah. No, not the turntables.
Okay.
No,
So you're going to be cheating?
Yeah, I'm gonna be doing the wheels.
I call it cheating, but you're still DJing.
Yeah, no,
right?
I'm not. No, I don't. Well, really, I don't consider myself a DJ. I'm not even called DJ. My actual handle is Demdread the Elemental.
Okay.
So it's a different thing. I'm bringing a different genre to the game. It's not a DJ thing. It's more something that's eclectic, and that really deals with the elements of sound, music.
I got you. More so than just playing something for people to dance, it's a little bit more involved.
Yes, it's definitely it's something I consider, Keri. That I say basically will put a pep in your step, a dip in your hip, and a glide in your stride.
He's a man of many words, brother. Let's go back a bit. Some of the things we might not have covered and discussed the first time that you were on the show. You have a very rich and deep appreciation for the struggle of our people, for African American people. I know that you actually met and talked to Malcolm X when you were 8 years old. What was that experience like, and how did that even happen?
It was very interesting, man, because between the ages of 6 and 8, when I actually did meet him, my brother and I would always be in the summer out playing on the front lawn. And every summer, these huge black automobiles would appear, and they would park in front of the house that was next door to us. And these men would get out, and they were all clean, very regimented, and they would all stand at attention, and one would be opening the door, basically, at which Malcolm was, coming out of.
Right.
And they would go in the house. Well, I didn't know who these guys were. I just knew at that particular point that it was just very interesting the way they rolled up. They were so methodically regimented.
Right.
And then when I turned 8, my father, came to me one day. I was playing in my room, and he said, "Come on, I want you to, come with me. I want you to meet someone." And so he takes me next door, and I recognized Malcolm immediately because obviously, TV and so on. I knew exactly who he was.
Right. Wow.
And he introduced himself to me. He made a comment about, you're a very, strong-looking young man, and I didn't really understand what that necessarily meant.
Correct.
Per se, basically, but we spent 15 minutes, and I got to talk to him for 15 minutes, and that was one of the most incredible 15 minutes of my existence because, here he is, and what I've seen on television, I'm now talking to. And it was very enlightening. It changed, and effectuated my desire basically to really delve heavier into, the aspect of us as African people, in these United States.
Yeah.
And in conjunction with what he's saying. Now, what I didn't know about the whole thing was the reason he was coming to that house every single time he came was because he was going to be speaking at the mosque, which was the biggest mosque in Philadelphia.
Okay.
Mosque number 12 at Broad and Erie.
Okay.
The woman that lived in that house, Mrs. Morris, was his administrative assistant when he came into the city. Her two sons, the Morris brothers, were his bodyguards.
Wow. Okay.
So when he came, basically, that's where he stayed, and that's where, obviously, I guess you could say their control center was. Interestingly enough, when he was killed, the Morris brothers disappeared.
Wow.
I never knew where they went or what happened, but basically, because Malcolm had been killed and there was that strife that was going on in the Nation of Islam, and also the FBI and so on, the thought process and theory was that they disappeared because they were probably next on the hit list.
Wow.
So I never saw them again, and his mother, died some years ago, but, she remained in the house.
It's interesting, man. Your dad has seemingly, in your youth at least, always been very instrumental in keeping you, aware of the movement. I know that he took you to a Black Panther, to the Black Panther's office. You met Bobby and Huey.
Most certainly, yes, indeed.
So how old were you?
I was about 9 or 10 at that time, if I'm not mistaken. It was around that time. Because all of this seemed to take place basically between the ages of 8 and 12. But yeah, I think it was about 9 or 10. He took me to the Black Panthers used to have an office in Philly on South Street.
Right. Okay.
So he took me down. They were doing something in the city at that point. But some of the larger, I guess you could say, than life representatives were in town, like Bobby and Huey. So I got to meet them. I even got to talk with H. Rap Brown over the phone and what have you. I think he was in Oakland. He didn't come that time. So I got to see all of that. And then shortly thereafter, I will never forget having met them. Rizzo was the police commissioner at that time.
Frank Rizzo.
Yeah, Frank Rizzo. And he conducted a raid on the Black Panther office on South Street.
Wow. And
if you've never seen the pictures, you can go on the web and you can see them and what have you. But he made all of the Panthers come out onto the street and he stripped them naked.
Yeah.
And I mean, television and everything internationally saw this.
Yeah.
And they hadn't done anything.
Yeah, wow.
This was just obviously a very racist move. But you will never forget the fact of seeing all of these, about 20, African men standing on a wall, completely butt naked.
Outside on the streets of Philadelphia.
Outside on the street, And he laughed about it. All the officers laughed about it. I mean, they ridiculed them, but it was a very devastating thing, which I say all of that to say, again, it propelled my desire to really get heavily involved in the aspect of civil rights and our people at a young age.
The name Rizzo made headlines around the world last summer when he personally led an early morning raid on Black Panther headquarters.
Commissioner Rizzo.
It was in that raid that Panthers were forced to strip in the street before photographers who had been summoned in advance. Rizzo was in the headlines again a few days later. The Panthers were holding a national convention in Philadelphia, and there was fear that some militants, incensed at the raid on their local headquarters, might confront the police. Rizzo's answer became legend.
They're a little angry. They were humiliated. We took their pants off them to search them, only brave when they outnumber people, meet. They said I hurled a challenge that I suggested, instead of laying an ambush, why don't you tell us where you're going to be? We'll give you the odds. We'll come and we'll okay, corral, If they have their convention, fine, no problem. But all I can say, and they consider this a challenge. They break our law, we'll be there. Meaning? The police. We'll be there and we'll see who wins. And if you're a betting man, you bet on us.
The weekend passed without incident, but Rizzo's tough image was intact. Then, a month ago, after 27 years in the department, after working his way through the ranks to the top, he decided to change jobs.
This is our man, Frank Rizzo. And it's now Philadelphia. Man, it's got to be love and happiness. Just as I'm back to see.
He resigned from the force to seek the Democratic nomination for mayor.
I want to ask you, so like generally speaking, before we go to break, what was the mood during your high school years in Philadelphia regarding the civil rights movement in that era? What was the mood like in Philadelphia, a very segregated city as many U.S. cities are? What was the mood like back then?
It was heavy. I mean, I was one of the leaders of the Black Student, Union in high school, and it was a very heavy thing because there was a lot of, prejudice. There was a lot of racism. The cops were out of control. I mean, you couldn't, hold rallies or anything like that without, fear of getting your head busted. And interestingly enough, the high school sits here, okay, and I had structured a walkout. And it was a walkout on the basis of what the police were doing in terms of the Richard Allen projects, which existed behind Temple University.
Is that where Bill Cosby's from?
Exactly.
Right.
It was a deplorable project.
Yeah.
By the time Bill Cosby was gone, it was still good.
Right.
But by the time, obviously, I was in high school, it was horrible.
Right, I remember.
The cops were dealing drugs in there. It was just a horrible situation.
Yeah.
And Rizzo came to the school with a bunch of officers, arrested us. And the funny thing about this is, the high school, as I said, is here. You walk out the door, and right across the street, like where that chair is, was the 14th Precinct Police District.
So he just kind of marched you guys.
Marched us right across
into
the street.
Police station.
And there were about 25 of us. And you know how small prison cells can be.
Right.
When they're detaining you.
Right.
And what have you. He put 12 of us in each one of those cells. And we were in there, no room to sit, literally standing basically, and crammed. And they kept us there for 4 hours until our parents came.
Wow.
And got us. And that, again, was another aspect of my education and movement, further into the struggle of our people.
Yeah, we got so much more to talk about, man. Right after this break, we're going to talk more with my brother from another mother, Mr. Andino Ward. We'll be right back. Sessions Cafe TV. So we're back here with Andino Ward. So in 1985, the Philadelphia Police Department, under the leadership of Philadelphia's first black mayor, infamously dropped a bomb on a row house in Philadelphia, in West Philadelphia, a middle-class section of West Philadelphia, a middle-class black neighborhood. Their goal was to evict, allegedly. I felt like their goal was to kill. But their goal was to evict a Back to Nature group called Move. They ended up killing 11 of the 13 Move members in the house, and destroying a neighborhood of 62 some odd homes. Two of the individuals that survived that bombing in May of 1985 was an adult Move member named Ramona Africa, and a young boy who at that point was being called, is known as Birdie Africa. That young boy, who was 13 years old when he escaped the inferno on Osage Avenue in West Philly, was your son.
That's correct.
Started coming in. We got the blankets and they was wet, and we had them in the bucket and they was wet, and then we put them over our heads and started laying down.
You say that Rad tried to take Tommaso out? How was he trying to take Tommaso out?
He opened the thing and had Tommaso and was taking him out, and then they started shooting again, and then they brought him back in.
spent many years with him after the fact. You got custody of him, and there was a lot of rehabilitation, both physically because of the burns on his body, and emotionally from the trauma of the fire, the bombing, and his years in the MOVE organization. I applaud you because I know it must have been a traumatic experience to say the least, to experience having to bring him back from that type of trauma at such a young age. But you did an awesome job, man.
Thank you.
Not a lot can be said that hasn't been said about that situation.
Right.
That was the premise of our first discussion with you here on Sessions Cafe. Unfortunately, we know that your son passed away in his later adult years, but I think he lived, based on what you told me and based on what I've read, he lived a pretty full life thanks to, your love and your commitment to fatherhood. And again, that was X amount of years ago, man, and we've covered that already, so I'm not going to be redundant and go past it, go through it again. But, since then, you've just done so many great things. You've done so many great things, man. Prison ministry, I want to talk about that. At what year did you become an ordained minister?
Oh, my goodness. This is like, about 20 years ago, so I'm 70 now. That would put me basically at about somewhere between 45 and 50 years of age when I decided to go into prison ministry. And I looked at it from the context that, once again, I saw that in the cities, the urban areas, there was a direct and intentional situation of creating environments that would suck the oxygen out of African males, and in so doing would deprive them of their education, would deprive them of the ability to live because the nucleus of their families were destroyed due to situations of poverty, crack, and all of the other things. And they were in a revolving door. I mean, they were literally being born and bred to walk and be sent into the juvenile justice system. Right. It is estimated even today that if a young African male is not educated properly by the time he hits 4th grade, he is immediately going to be in the prison system.
Wow.
He will be there. There's no ifs, ands, or buts.
Right. It's just a matter of when.
Right.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. And so I decided, I wanted to coming from a faith base, because I do consider myself born again, and at the same time, basically, the aspect of trying to bring some semblance of understanding to the existence of a lot of these guys. And really, Keri, it started before. I mean, the aspect of the prison situation for me started years before, basically, even becoming an ordained minister. I was looking for my son when I came home from Europe.
Right.
And, excuse me, I decided basically to go into the social service end of things and to try and see if he was in that system.
Right.
And when I was in there, I was working for a particular establishment where I was responsible for going into the homes of, our children and, predominantly, African and Spanish, and evaluating the homes. Because it was deplorable. Yeah. Mothers were selling their kids for crack,
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, all kinds of things were going on. And I would have to adjudicate the child from the home into the system.
Wow.
And they would live in the residential facility that I worked for and worked at.
Okay.
And I just saw that, this was horrible. I mean, the whole thing was horrible because all of them would eventually be ending up in juvenile jail and then in prison.
Right.
Well, so be it. As this went on, and finally when I did become ordained and prison ministry, I was astonished because some of the very boys, that I had dealt with when I was dealing with that environment of taking them from their families and adjudicating them, they were now in prison.
Oh, man.
I was seeing them as grown men.
Wow.
And they knew me. It's like, Mr. Ward, and I'd look at them like, okay. You know, and then they tell me who they were, and I'm like, you're kidding.
Yeah.
You know? So it was an ongoing process, and I really spent a lot of time, you know, in the prisons trying to deal with the aspect of their recidivism. The thing that was so traumatic and eventually, you know, came to an end with all of this was the fact that the system itself was just not conducive to really helping these, you know, these guys.
Right, yeah.
And one day I was teaching a Bible study, and the way the prison works is, you know, there are lines that come off of the wall, and inmates have to walk either coming from something or going to something.
Right.
But you got to stay on that side of the line.
Almost like a conveyor belt.
Exactly. Well, you know, they were coming to the kitchen for my, you know, Bible study. And this one kid that was walking away, I think he had been at the gym or something, he looks over, you know, on the other side, and he says, you know, what's up, my nigga? And I like looked at him, and I'm like, my man, why would you do that? You're coming to a Bible study.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, that's not who you are. And he said, oh no, Pastor Ward, that's my father.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, whoa. I mean, if I had been wearing dentures, they'd have fell out. Because my mouth dropped, and I didn't know what to say.
That was his father.
Right.
Yeah.
That was his father. And then I come to find out that on the female side of the equation in the prison, his mother and sisters were over there.
Oh, wow. That's
the entire family.
And that kind of, at that point, I guess you decided, you know what? Where do I really fit in this?
Yeah, it truly was. Plus, you know, obviously you're contending with the aspect of like cruel guards, you know, because they don't care.
Right, yeah.
You know, and I mean, you know, you're treated like you're less than human.
Right.
Inmates are like, you know, cruel to each other.
Yeah.
You know, it was just like an environment of concentrated evil.
Right.
You know what I mean? And you can't get out.
Yeah. Wow. So we always run out of time when we talk, but before that happens, I want to the Kicking the Actual Factuals is your podcast.
That's
how
right,
can we what's it about very quickly, and what's the synopsis, and how can people check it out?
Kicking the Actual Factuals is completely about the aspects of the social and you know, spiritual environment of African folk in these United States and the world, and what we have gone through, what we will, you know, or are going through, and what we will continue to go through. So it encompasses all of that, and also a method of trying to educate our people on our history. If you don't know your history, you honestly don't know who you are.
That's true.
You know,
Yeah.
and we are, I know I am seeing and have been seeing up to the age of 70, the fact that basically, you know, our youth truly do not know who they are.
That's true.
You know, and they are lost in a context of a world that they have no idea, you know, where they are in it and what they were and their people were before being placed in it, and what their people have gone through throughout it.
So how can people check out the podcast?
They can definitely go to Spotify. Basically, it's right there. Dem Dread Kicking the Actual Factuals. It's also on Apple Music. It's also on Podbean and a few others.
Okay.
And they can also go to my website, demdread.com.
Okay.
WW. And, you know, they can pick it up from there. And there's a lot of history on the website. I mean, if you've not understand and you don't know your history, the website, my website, will really give you a really intense and heavy, you know, aspect of our history, and it's done in pictures. I didn't do it in words.
Right.
I did it in a pictorial, and you will see photos that you've probably never seen nor knew existed.
And I mean, you're deep when it comes to history. That's the. I mean, you most recently this past summer, you were an honorary guest at the 55th African American Day Parade in Harlem.
Thanks to you.
Well, I mean, hey, you deserved it, brother. You just have so much going on. Your life is almost like a plethora of history. And what's next? A proposed book, maybe?
That is definitely on the mend and in the mix. And obviously, I owe that suggestion to you.
I wanted to.
You
I
know
just
what
wanted
I mean?
to tell your story, brother.
You know, so you and I definitely, and in case you didn't know, this brother and I will be spending some significant time together because he wants to obviously do that.
Yeah.
And I have been, you know, approached by many people, and I've given none of them any time on this issue except him.
Wow.
And the reason is because I look at him in a very different context, and the fact that the way he thinks, the way he understands, and what he's doing is indicative of, you know, the progression of life that I would want from anyone who is going to, you know, tell the story.
Right. Thank you, man. That means a lot coming from you. We got so much more to talk about. I'm probably going to have to bring you on the show again and again and again because you're like a continuous ball of stories and lessons. But for now, Andino, Mr. Ward, as I like to call you, even though you don't like for me to call you Mr. Ward, I want to thank you for coming on the show.
My brother,
again.
It's always a pleasure. You can call on me anytime, and, you know, basically, I will be there.
Thank you.
All right.
We'll see you guys next week on Sessions Cafe TV show.